lockdowns or the quarantines and that the lockdowns, they vary dramatically from place to place. So like Shandong, where I was living, my friends have been free for like 2, 3 weeks. And other places, people are still on a pretty strict lockdown. So it just depends where they are. Andy, I think he's in Beijing, isn't he? He was last time I talked to him. I think he's still in Beijing.
Yes, and what I'm wondering is, what do you think about the American response? Because some people I know I saw on CNN, I believe it was Bill Gates or somebody saying that you know a state to state or county to county shutdown isn't going to work to contain this.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, the the issue with the states, if you tried to copy the China model, everyone says copy the China model. You know, the China model was that in addition to closing, completely shutting down whole cities, at one point there were 800 million people under quarantine in China or under lockdown in China. And in China, every civil servant, if you work for the government, even like school teachers, if you work for the government, you're a civil servant and you could be called to national service when there's an emergency. So they enlisted all sorts of people to go around like house to house and check people's temperature. You had to let them in. You had no choice. You have no sovereignty in China. You can't say, well, you know, you have to have a warrant or you can't come in my house. So they come in your house, they check the temperature of everyone in the house. And if one person's temperature was high, they took that person away. And that person had no say in the matter. Nobody had any say in the matter. And then the family was put under quarantine. And you can't do that in the States. And when I say they took these people away, I mean, there are images of quarantine boxes. They had these big metal boxes. They were shoving people in a box and locking it and putting it on the back of a truck, and God knows where it went. Um, Given the smuggled footage that we were getting from inside the quarantine hospitals, it looked like one of those like a scene from a Civil War movie, an old Civil War hospital, and the beds were way too close together. And I was just thinking, any just being sent there is like a death sentence. And you know, so that's what China's quarantine looked like. And so China is now trying to portray themselves as having the great model that's going to save everybody, and a few countries are buying into it. But the reality is, it's not going to. You can't do the same thing in another country you did in China. And like one of the things was, China told a lot of countries, and we're doing it here in Mongolia too. They had people standing at the grocery store before you came in the grocery store. They checked your temperature, and that's great. But in China, if they checked your temperature and it was high, they immediately put you under, you know, effectively under arrest, and then you were whisked off to a quarantine center somewhere. I can't imagine in Mongolia that they had that authority or that they would do that to people, and they're certainly not going to do it in the States. So it would be a more, they may not even be allowed to bar the person from entering the grocery store, you know? So you can't do the things in the States that they did in China, and the things they did in China are inhumane.
Right, but because we can't do those things, what do you think's going to happen here in the next week or two?
So one of the many theories, I had a meeting with the EU yesterday, and we talked about this for like an hour. And one of the theories is that viruses just have to run their course, and that there's literally nothing you can do other than if you develop a vaccine. And one of the examples that they had was the Spanish flu, which is, you know, the worst epidemic that's happened in the last 100 years, and it killed something